Okay, let's see what happens. Yes, it is recording. So let's hope for the best.
Yes.
Jai Shriman Narayana, Jai Shri
Jai
Krishna,
Shrimanarayana Mataji. Jai Shri
Jai
Krishna.
Jagannath. So
Jai Jagannath.
today we are going to have an overview of Bhagavad Gita.
Yes, Mataji. An important topic,
Yeah. So,
because I think,
uh,
I think, I asked you for this simply given the fact that when, obviously, when you start the Bhagavad Gita and you read through it, I think this is important, Mataji, for people who are new but who are not new news, because what it is that you start reading the Bhagavad Gita and you realize that it can be overwhelming sometimes, because and then also you start to sometimes ask yourself, is there a structure to it? Is there, are the chapters, is there a message in one particular group of chapters? What's the message in the middle? What's the message at the beginning? How is it structured? How does it relate to sadhana? I feel there comes a point where you need to make sense of it in a more overarching perspective, if that makes sense, Mataji. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how it's structured in terms of the messages that the chapters seek to deliver to the reader. Does that make sense, Mataji?
yeah, of course, of course. I have discussed this in the commentaries to the text.
Mm.
And I have prepared also some appendixes to the study of Bhagavad Gita. There are three. Only one of them is also in English. The other two are in Italian language. I hope to be able to make the English version soon enough. Let's see what will happen. But yeah, also in the commentaries of Gita, into my edition here, we have plenty of elaboration on this point as well.
And I think,
So,
Mataji, if I may add, that I think why this is important is because if you look at certain modern organizations, they don't provide this overview to the detail that is required. And also, what it is, Mataji, is the neophyte like myself comes into this, and we're faced with Brahman, we're faced with Atman realization, we are faced with the notion that we are to look inwards, but we're faced with terms like bhakti, and then we sometimes ask ourselves, well, what order do things follow? Did Krishna give us? Krishna clearly said all this to give us some, in a structured manner. So how do we make use of that structure in our sadhana? How do we use that to deepen our understanding? Is it Atman first? Is it Brahman? Is it Bhakti? Which order does it all go to make
okay,
sadhana
yeah.
flow? Does that make sense,
Yeah,
Mataji?
I understand. I understand. One important thing that not many people know is that the traditional way of studying any text is to read it three times. The first time when you read Bhagavad Gita, it is better to just read the translation without going into the commentaries, explanations, and like that. So as you can see the screen, the translation is that part which is in bold characters.
Yes.
So Dhritarashtra said, "O Sanjaya, what did my sons and Pandu's sons, my people or supporters, and the people or supporters of Pandu, do? What did they do? And after they assembled in the sacred place of Dharma, the battlefield of Kurukshetra, ready to fight." Now, if we just read the translations, we can understand the thread of the discussion. Because if we read one verse per day, we miss the general thread of the discussion.
And that's what happened to me.
Yeah,
that's
what happens to everyone who's reading the Gita as a sadhana, as you said.
Yes.
When people, follow a sadhana that is connected to Bhagavad Gita or any other shastra, they usually do, regularly, they read one verse a day. Okay? But that is not helping you to get the entire picture. That applies to any conversation. If you look at any movie, for example, and you are just listening to one line of a dialogue, only that each day, one day after the other. But you understand. You lose the thread. You don't even get the thread to begin with. So, Bhagavad Gita is very valuable, not only because it's so rich and precise and complete and simple to understand, but also because it's short. Compared to...
it's really interesting because this is exactly what I did. I went into it reading a verse a day from the very beginning. And secondly, I always had this impression it was rich. It's very rich. So you think, well, if it's really rich, I should savor every mouthful.
No. That's why you need to read it 3 times. The first time, it's not like regular food. Just imagine you are a cow. A cow has 3 phases of digestion. The cow first eats the stuff and sends it to the stomach. Then it comes back up. I think the cow has 4 stomachs or something like that.
Yeah, three or four.
3 or 4, something like that. So, we have to look at it in the perspective of a cow. If we want to digest it, we need to quickly read the dialogue. That is the first reading, and it will not take more than half an hour. Half an hour, if you are very slow, let's say 1 hour, in which you just need to get the general picture of what they are talking about. Because most people who follow the southern idea, they have no idea what the Bhagavad Gita says. Because they try to absorb one verse at a time, so they don't put it into the context, and so they forget. And I cannot tell you how many times I found people who quote verses or ideas, they say they're from Bhagavad Gita, and they're not from Bhagavad Gita. So when I ask them, okay, which verse was that? They get angry and insult me and say, oh, you're not Indian. Okay, thanks. So, the point is, first of all, we have to get a general idea what the Bhagavad Gita is saying. What is the context, what is the situation. And this is the first reading. The first reading can be very quick. You don't need to understand everything. You just need to get an idea.
And when you mean the first reading, you mean read right through it from the first chapter to the end, or read chapter by chapter?
From the first chapter to the end, possibly. Or if you cannot do it in one sitting, you can do, half today and half tomorrow.
Yes.
And you don't have to do the whole thing. But it's still, your mind is fresh.
Yes.
From one day to the other, in a span of a few days, your mind is still keeping the thread of the discussion.
Well,
because
that's
it's a
the very
recent
first
memory.
thing. That's the very first thing that is news to me. Probably a good few decades too late. But better late than never.
Never too late. That's the motto of reincarnation.
No, exactly. But even then, this is something, a learning point we've barely started. So I think that's really
It's
interesting.
okay,
Yeah.
it's good. Yeah. But the idea, I don't know, you never heard the idea that one should study any text for 3 times?
No, I've heard that.
You heard that.
haven't
Yeah,
listened.
exactly.
Yeah.
But this is why. So, the first reading goes very quick. We can say it's superficial, but it should not be superficial. It should be to get a general picture, from a distance. Like when you look at, when you want to know what the mountain is, okay, the first look at the mountain must be from a distance. Because otherwise you don't understand what a mountain is. If you're trying to understand what a mountain is, once you are too near to the mountain and you are focusing on each, 3 feet of path, you cannot understand what a mountain is. So, you said overview. This is exactly the point. The first reading is just an overview. So you see what a mountain is. Okay. This is the first reading. Then, the second reading, after you have gone through the first reading, the second reading is that you actually try to understand. And then you can go one verse a day. But because you already know what they're talking about,
That's your second reading, which is 1 verse a day, basically.
Yeah. Because you already know from your first reading what they're talking about. You understand? So you can go one or more, but you can go slower, and within the great picture that you already have in your mind, you go and see what they're talking about, and you try to actually understand the general meaning of what they're saying. It's not that you cannot go on until you have realized, each verse, because otherwise, you'd never get to the end. Okay. Because, at every new reading, after you have read the Gita for, 30 years, you still learn something. Okay, we have some, you're still there, okay.
Nope, I can hear you, Mataji.
But it's my computer that is flashing weird stuff. Okay, no problem. So basically, you can continue for the rest of your life, but it's okay, we just absorb whatever we can absorb at each reading, and we don't expect too much from ourselves, because it's a gradual process. Okay, so this is the second reading, and you actually try to understand the meaning of the verse. Still, you try to actually focus. And if you like, it's a good idea to go and see the commentary. Because if you're reading 1 verse a day, you can also afford to read the commentary, so you get some deeper vision on the meaning of the verse. The third reading is you actually focus on the Sanskrit, on the original language. The entire verse. You focus on the original verse in the Sanskrit original version, and you actually understand more deeply what it is about. And
that's different. And that's different to the second time, because on the second time you're not reading the Sanskrit primarily. No. You're reading the translation with the purport if needed.
Yeah. If you can, absorb the purport, okay, that's good. Or otherwise you can just, read the translation and try to understand the translation verse by verse. Okay, the purport is not essential. we want to focus on the actual original text of the Gita, which is the authority. Whatever is there in the purport, anyone who wrote, it doesn't matter who wrote the purport, but that's not the Gita. That's an elaboration on the Gita. This is something that many people, like our common friends, don't understand, because they think that whatever is written, including the purports, that's the Gita. No, that's not exactly correct. Because the Gita is just what is the original text. Everything else is an elaboration, an explanation, a help, a sort of help to understand the original text. Is that clearer?
Very, very clear. And I think what you're trying to say here is that obviously the Sanskrit is the words of Sri Krishna to Arjuna.
Yeah.
That is the Gita. That is the Gita. The purports are there. There's a degree of individual opinion.
That's why they're called Bhashya. They're called Tarka. They're called, it's a discussion on the meaning of the verse. It's not the verse itself. It's not the Bhagavad Gita. It's a commentary on the Bhagavad Gita. And it doesn't have the same authority.
Absolutely. But Mataji, there's three aspects to this, and you've commented on the significance of the relevant. You've commented on the significance of the Sanskrit.
Okay.
That's the gold standard.
Yeah.
You've commented on the purports being interpretive. But can I ask you to comment on the translation? Because that's what a lot of your followers will go to.
Yeah, that's exactly. The third reading is focusing on the Sanskrit. And if you don't actually understand the Sanskrit, you cannot understand if the translation is appropriate or not. Because the translation is just one notch above the commentary. But the translation is not the original.
As we've seen in recent decades.
So many times. We've seen all along the history of mankind. Okay. So the most important thing is the original text. That is the Bhagavad Gita. But because the original text is in Sanskrit, and not everyone is, fully conversant with Sanskrit, we have the translation. But after the translation, after the purport, we have to go back to the actual original text. So we can understand, as you said, the translation and the purport, and then after we understand the original text in Sanskrit, we can understand better how to apply it in our own life. This is the system, the traditional system. The 3 times in which we study the Shastra, we study 3 times, has this purpose. This is the purpose. This is the meaning. This is the plan. It's not just because you repeat 3 times and you memorize. Okay, you can memorize, but 3 times is not enough to memorize. But the 3 times are 3 different times. It's not that you read every verse 3 times, one after the other. Because some people may interpret that in that way. But that's incorrect. So 3 times the whole thing. The first time, just the translation, so you get the general idea. The second time, you try to understand each verse with the help of a purport, which is not the authority, the main authority, but it's useful. And the third time, you go back to the original Sanskrit, which you have not read yet, and you study the original Sanskrit. Okay, this is, I guess it's somehow news to you.
Well, it is, but in a nice way, because
Okay.
it kind of tells me that, because sometimes when you approach it the wrong way, you feel stuck. Whereas now, I think there's a good reason why sometimes I feel stuck, because
Of
I
course.
haven't approached it
Yeah.
in the correct way.
Yeah.
And also, Mataji, the other thing as well is, and I'd like your commentary on this generically, of course, is that Sanskrit is such a precise language that you are reliant on the authority and the expertise of the person who's doing the translating.
Yeah.
And they could, a fraction of a deviation from the original Sanskrit in translation can sometimes bring a very different message. And I'd just like your comments on that in a very generic way,
Yeah,
not pointing
dear
anyone
Miss
out,
Bridget,
if
this
that
is
makes sense.
precisely why we have, in the third reading, we have to go back to the original Sanskrit. We don't need to become great professors of Sanskrit. We don't need to become, poets who compose Sanskrit, epic poems in a very complicated and perfect manner. We just need to use a dictionary and have a basic grammar. Anyone can do that. Anyone can do that. And when you have the Devanagari, the transliteration, and the dictionary meanings, besides the literary translation and purport, that is helping you even more. Because if you just, I have seen lots of texts, they just have the Devanagari. And, that's it. You can't do anything about it, because that's what you get. If you can read, okay. If you make mistakes, it's your problem. But when we have the Devanagari and the transliteration and the dictionary meanings separated, the words are separated. You heard about the word sandhi.
I've heard, yes.
Sandhi is the system of uniting words. So if you see, the Sanskrit, especially Devanagari, it's a bit daunting, because they have very long words. Like Drishva tu Pandavanikam. Pandavanikam is one word. Duryodhanastada, is also one word. Which, okay. But if you separate, Pandavanikam, Vyudham, Duryodhanas, Tada, then we divide the words. We can see the grammar, the grammatical forms. We can divide the word. Acharyam upasangamya. Acharyam upasangamya. Approaching the acharya, approaching the teacher. Vachanam abravit. It's one word. But we can divide it to the two original parts, which is vachanam, the speech, and abravit, spoke. You understand?
Yes.
These are dictionary meanings. This analysis of each specific word is very useful, because it helps us to understand the dictionary and the grammar. So it's not difficult to find Sanskrit dictionaries today, especially online. For a long time before internet, I was using one, paper Sanskrit dictionary, specifically Monier Williams, which is, I think, the most famous. But it was a headache. It was not so easy. Now with the online dictionaries, it's so easy.
Yes, I've noticed.
Yeah.
I've noticed they're even linked to some electronic versions of the Bhagavad Gita, where each word is linked to a
sometimes
dictionary.
sometimes but I found a very good online Sanskrit dictionary which is not linked to any publication or any, it's just a dictionary. So you type the word, you can type either the Sanskrit word or the English word, Sanskrit in a transliterated form, approximate form, and then the website gives you all the similar things. So you can choose, you can find, you can, just like in a dictionary. But the printed dictionary is tricky because Sanskrit has a different order of letters, alphabetical order. It's not like the English alphabetical order. It's very different. So, for example, it starts with a K. Is it what?
Yes.
What?
Yes.
So, what I did, I made a paper, I wrote down on paper, I wrote the letters in the alphabetical order of the Sanskrit. So whenever I was looking for some word on the dictionary, I had this list. So I could manage, because otherwise it would have been like, whoa, what are we going to do here?
So what you're saying, Mataji, is on the third time, you literally go to the Sanskrit, have your Sanskrit dictionary by your side, and you literally read it, referencing the Sanskrit dictionary to the words effectively. Mataji.
And the basic grammar.
Yes.
Because we can see, for example, where is a singular and where is a plural. For example, we had the famous verse, Tadvidi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya, upadekshanti tegenam gyaninas tattvadarshinaha. Now, the trick is that it's a plural, while in the translation that we were, that our friends have produced and are, basing themselves about, is a singular. So in the original plural, Krishna says that we need to approach those who have seen the truth, those who see the truth, not one person only who has seen the truth. And
of course,
that only one person will give us the diksha. No, that's plural. Upadekshanti will give diksha, will initiate, will transmit the knowledge. That's plural. And that's some basic grammar. You don't need to be a professor to, to see the difference between the singular and the plural. You see the point?
Very much so. And that specific example has brought it to life. Absolutely.
Yeah. And this was one of the things that switched on some light bulb in my brain. Because, that's what Krishna says. Why you are translating it another way? Then, I got this intuition, this enlightenment, if you want, or this understanding that the author of the purport and the translation wanted to help his students not to go dispersing themselves among many teachers, because sometimes, especially in Kali Yuga, teachers say different things.
Yeah, I mean, there's an agenda at play.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, so you have to be wary of these traps, so to speak. So yeah, absolutely, I'm very conscious of that. So Mataji, really important points in this introductory bit, which effectively reading it 3 times, how you approach the reading it 3 times, with the emphasis being on, obviously, the first one is, I don't want to use the word skimming through it, but but
it's pretty accurate. Just go quickly through it.
Yeah,
you know, we
absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. The second time is you read the translations plus or minus the purports.
yeah,
And obviously the third time is you read the Sanskrit in
yeah,
detail with a Sanskrit sort of dictionary there. So I think that's really, I think this initial overview has been very, very helpful.
good,
I can already see this extending beyond a one-part series that we're going to
yeah,
discuss. So absolutely. So that sets the scene very nicely for those of us who are starting our journey. So really
yeah,
grateful for that initial overview.
yeah. Also, if you like at any time, you can have like, in the edition that I have prepared, I also have introductions, general introduction, and then introduction to each chapter. So that
Yes,
can
I
also,
noticed that.
yeah, you notice that. That can
I
also be
noticed that.
useful.
But I will confess that I only started to read those introductions a little bit later in my reading of your sort of Bhagavad Gita. Initially, I went straight into your translation
Yeah.
and the purport. But then afterwards, I really wanted an overview, which is why I asked for this talk.
No,
So
no,
that's why
it's
I
okay,
went
it's
to
okay. Also,
the
you see
introduction.
here, in this introduction, I gave the some different approach. Like the first time, you should just read the translation to grasp the thread discussion. And second time, you should read the translation together with the Navagari text and then the dictionary meaning. And the third reading should include the commentaries and try to understand the general meaning. So yeah, but the point is that three times is a charm, as they say.
Nope,
Also,
nope.
yeah,
That is very helpful. There is
good,
a question I have to ask you, Matt.
yeah,
And you get some people who say that before you do your reading of the Bhagavad Gita, the environment has to be right, the setting has to be right. You should say a prayer before you start.
nah, you're
Um,
going, no, no, you're going, then you're never going to start.
Yeah, no, that's why I asked you,
Yeah,
because I wanted to understand how
yeah,
significant these rituals were, Mataji, from that side, and I just wanted
yeah.
is that a bit overstated in your view?
Yeah, I believe that it can be nice, but it's not indispensable. It's not crucial.
Right, okay, that's helpful.
Because that there is, I don't know if you heard this, there is a proverb saying that the better is the enemy of the good.
Yes,
Because
yes.
if you wait for the ideal situation,
Mm.
you're never going to do anything.
I remember, Mataji, when I not until not so long ago when I played football for my team, the days that I took so much emphasis on preparing my kit and getting everything right. I had the worst games, and
Yes,
the days where I just flung on
yes.
whatever was there and just went out, I had the best games. So I've
Yeah,
realised there's a there's a message in that somewhere,
yeah, yeah,
maybe.
yeah. There is. Most certainly there is. Because, when we do all the preparation, we are tired already.
Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. So that's important. And secondly, Mataji, my question is: is there a mindset that you adopt when you read your Bhagavad Gita, just for newbies, or do you just pick it up and read it without thinking too much? Well, what are your thoughts on that?
Sorry. Yeah. um, there are mental attitudes that can help. But even if you just pick it up and read, it's okay. Especially the first time.
I only asked this, Mataji, because when I was younger, I didn't realize its significance, so I read it without thinking too much. Now I'm conscious that these are the words of God, and I have a greater idea of what God is. So I'm conscious that I'm reading very much the words of God and is non-different from God.
This is because you started to read, even if superficially. Because if you never started, you never had come to this point.
Absolutely, that's my point.
Yeah. So, introduction, this edition of Srimad Bhagavad Gita, blah blah blah. Okay, then chapter 1, Arjuna Vishada Yoga. The yoga of Arjuna's grief. Which is, what? Is that a yoga? Yeah, it's a yoga. So sometimes the title of the chapter is even changed into something less depressing, such as Observing the Armies on the Battlefield. I think you remember where it is coming from. However, an attentive reading of this chapter will help us to understand the crucial difference between material compassion and spiritual compassion, and to facilitate the application of Gita to our own personal life. Thus, going from philosophy to experience, from theory to practice, from speculation to experience. Frustration in materialistic life is not a bad thing. Rather, it is a symptom of intelligence, because material possessions, positions, and identifications cannot really give full happiness and satisfaction. Materialists are typically always trying to get more possessions, and as soon as they obtain an object they coveted, they lose interest in it and start desiring something else. Of course, there is a minimum level of material facilities that we all need in order to maintain our bodies and minds in a healthy and functional state, and Vedic society normally guarantees this level to all members. But people are trained to get their happiness and satisfaction in life from the proper performance of their duties, rather than from the amount of sense gratification or material properties or control over others. So, we analyze what is the meaning of Arjuna's grief. Okay. And in the Vedic system, blah blah blah, the material world has been specifically and perfectly engineered to help each individual progress and develop along higher and wider levels of awareness, up to the greatest possible realization, God realization. So, one who understands that in this material world it is not possible to find the perfection of Satchit and Ananda, and out of this virtuous frustration tries to understand what else exists beyond this level of imperfection and impermanence, is taking the first step in the journey of self-realization. So it's also a yoga. What is the meaning of yoga? Yoga means engagement. Engagement in the realization of the self. Okay, the core of us represent, whatever. So, this is the first chapter. And I think you've read it many times, because everyone starts with the first chapter and then gets stuck. Okay.
Yes, 100%, Mataji, and that's you've summed up my progress there. So yeah, absolutely.
yeah, okay. No, that's normal. Then we have chapter 2. Okay, we have.
So Mataji, here's a question for you.
Yeah.
So you've outlined the first chapter, and then the first chapter, and then people say, you have this first chapter which is observing the armies, and then you have the second chapter which people say is almost like a mini Gita in its own right.
Yeah, it is.
Could I ask you to comment on what if you were to give an overview of the first chapter and link it to why we have this mini Gita in the second chapter? What's the purpose of such a structure, if that makes sense?
The structure is that in every situation we need to understand the context. So the first chapter is a context. And if we understand what is the context of the entire Bhagavad Gita and the Mahabharata, it's even better. So in my appendix, Guide to the Study, I gave a summary of the Mahabharata so that we can generally understand what we're talking about. because I have seen many people misunderstand the problem that Arjuna is expressing.
Can you please clarify this point? Because I'm sure I and others would have made the same mistake.
Yeah, I mean, I even heard a big acharya, saying, oh, Bhagavad Gita is a text that incites violence. Yeah, are you stupid or what? So absolutely not. I have seen one Indian TV serial, whatever film, I don't remember, cartoonish what, that shows Arjuna and Krishna, and Arjuna said, oh Krishna, what have I done? Why did I want to fight this war? Now, you see, the Kauravas are so many. I'm so scared. Let's run away. Okay.
Gosh, you're joking. That's
nope,
ridiculous.
Unfortunately, I'm not joking. Unfortunately, I wish. I wish I was joking.
So what you're saying, the first chapter is an overview, and then
the first chapter is an introduction, not an overview. The overview is the second chapter. That's why I'm saying it's a mini Gita. Overview means the whole thing.
I guess the first chapter was setting the scene then, wasn't it?
Yes, exactly. An introduction, setting the scene. Okay, why Arjuna is having a problem here? The problem is the starting point from which Krishna is going to give his teachings. In fact, Arjuna is playing the role of us. He's exemplifying our conditions on the battlefield of life. So we get, we are encouraged to identify with Arjuna. And that makes the whole thing much more serious. Because it gives us the understanding that we are talking real stuff here. We are not just, armchair philosophers, speculating on things that are not relevant to our life. You understand?
I do. And then, so the first chapter is setting the scene.
Yes.
And then what's really interesting is that you almost get a mini Gita in chapter 2.
Exactly.
Is that because is that there because it gives some people with short attention spans a good overview of it?
Not just that, but it presents the substance, the first step into understanding why we need to develop our transcendental realization, why we need the knowledge, why we need the understanding, why we need to apply Dharma and Vidya. It's a general overview, So we can read here the introduction to the chapter 2. The second chapter of Gita constitutes a brief summary of the entire discourse between Krishna and Arjuna, and enumerates, Sankhya means enumeration, a number of approaches for the purpose of showing that they are actually all parts of the great science of yoga. So, on Quora someone asked me, every chapter of the Gita is a different name of yoga. So that does mean there are 18 types of yoga? No. There is only one yoga.
So, Mataji, the original, I don't know what phrase I should use for this, but was the Gita originally, what's the history of how the chapters were devised, Mataji? Was it originally in chapters or how was it originally written, or is the chapters more modern? No, we don't know.
I don't know, but I don't think it's very important to try to
No, not at all. But I just wanted to ask. No. I wanted to ask: was there a partition when it was originally written?
No, not really. But I think that the thread of the discussion is quite
Yes.
germane, if they say,
Yes.
to the division
Yes.
into chapter and to the title of the chapters. Still today, I have seen people giving different names to the chapters, because in the Sanskrit, the original Sanskrit, there is no name title to the chapters, but there is a division in chapters. That is definitely a fact, because chapter 1 verse
Yes.
1 to whatever, that is the original structure. The name of the chapter is something that definitely came later, but it's quite logical, we could say.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Please carry on.
Okay, so the Indologist view, heavily influenced by the Western academic mentality, presents a relativistic scenario of different schools of thought, as if they were in competition to each other and not aimed at integrating each other in the greater picture. So we sometimes see people claiming that they're following Raja Yoga, Kriya Yoga, or Bhakti Yoga. Does that say anything to you? As if they were different products on the market, vying for the endorsement of the consumers, or different political parties demanding exclusive ideological allegiance from their members. A student of philosophy in mainstream Western academia is presented with a so-called objective history of the evolution of human thought, or we should say of human speculation, as opposed to the dogma enforced by Christianity for several centuries on the entire Western society. Inevitably, the student develops a cynical vision and the belief that reality does not exist, or at least it cannot be known. This cannot satisfy a sincere seeker who aspires to actually understand reality as it is. So when we say there is a Jnana Yoga and a Bhakti Yoga and the Karma Yoga, and you say, oh, the Bhakti Yoga is the best, Karma Yoga is bad, Jnana Yoga is bad, so Jnana, Karma, we just throw them away. That's not what Krishna says. So if we come up to this idea that we should, throw karma and jnana out of the window, we are not following Bhagavad Gita. We are not following what Krishna says. So that's speculation. That's deviation. Yeah.
So you brought us nicely to the next topic, which is that obviously you get the overview, and then you get chapter 3, karma,
exactly.
and then obviously. So what you're saying here is that some people view a hierarchical relationship with all the types of karma, jhana, bhakti. But you're suggesting that isn't the case, and the chapters don't follow a hierarchical relationship.
Exactly, because if you go and see the chapters, if it was hierarchical, the bhakti would come last, or first, or last. But it's not.
Yes.
So we have the chapter 13, not chapter 18. So we have the Arjuna Vishada Yoga, the Sankhya Yoga, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Sannyasa Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, Vijnana Yoga, Taraka Brahma Yoga, Rajaguhya Yoga, Vibhuti Yoga, Vishwarupa Darshana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, chapter 12, not 13, chapter 12. Then we have, after Bhakti Yoga, we have chapter 13, Prakriti Purusha Viveka Yoga, the Gunatraya Vibhaga Yoga, the Purushottama Yoga, the Daivasura Sampada Vibhaga Yoga, the Shraddhatraya Vibhaga Yoga, and the Moksha Yoga. So, we need karma and jnana to achieve bhakti, because Krishna always says that you perform your duty.
Yes.
Even in the sannyasa yoga, Krishna says The real sannyasi is not the one who, rejects his duties. The one who performs his duties with detachment, as devotional service. So what is bhakti actually?
Yes. So Mataji, you see, after the overview, you have chapter 3, which focuses on karma.
Yeah.
Can I ask your comments on chapter? What, and in your view, why do we start with chapter 3 on karma and then move into knowledge, the science of knowledge in chapter 4?
So karma yoga, we need to understand the meaning of karma because many people get it completely confused. So the karma is the dutiful action. The dutiful action can be performed either with a selfish desire for benefits or without selfish desires for benefits. If it is performed without selfish desires, it is called akarma. But karmis are good people. If they are attached to the results of the action, that means they're performing their duties, but they also want something in return, which is typically a bit rajasic. But through the yagyas, and that's what chapter 3 is talking about. It's talking about all the yagyas, right?
Yes. Krishna goes into the devas and
exactly. So the point of the karma yoga is to learn to perform the duties, prescribed duties, as a yagya. Yagyartat karmano nyatra lokaya karma bandhana. So we are not bound by karma if we perform our karma in a spirit of yagya. And this is the same as bhakti. When Krishna will speak about bhakti, he will say, Yat karoshi adasnasya juhosi dadasya. So that includes the karma and the jnana and everything else.
And the misconception people make is, well, bhakti is some very, very specific duty that has been ascribed to me when I've reached a very advanced level of spiritual development.
No, they're prescribed to you by whom? When you have reached a very advanced level of spiritual evolution, you have a direct relationship with Krishna. Nobody is assigning you any special activity.
I'm just highlighting the common misconception.
Yeah, that is a misconception.
Whereas what you're suggesting is that the real message of chapter 3 is that you can spiritualize, quote unquote, or make bhakti, quote, make into bhakti, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Any
your prescribed duties.
Your prescribed duty.
Yeah.
In the mode, in the consciousness of sacrifice.
Of yagya, precisely. Now, the point is, an important point that many people mess up, is that they think that whatever action we do in the name of bhakti, even if it is vikarma or ugra karma, is transcendentally pure. So we are going to kill innocent people just because they don't worship our guru. That's devotional service. Because my guru told me to do that. No. We heard that before, right? Did we? Didn't we?
Oh, many times, and people even jump behind the political movements and call that quote unquote bhakti, and they forget that. And what I've learned from our own conversations is that Vinashaya Dushkritam doesn't talk about Dushkritam meaning some sect or other. It's people who are evildoers.
Yes.
That's the bottom line, basically.
And the Gita is Yeshan Twantagatam Papam. Only those who have completely given up all the bad activities. Papam. Otherwise, if we don't give up all the bad activities, we cannot say we are engaged in bhakti.
Yes.
We are just trying, aspiring, whatever, I don't know,
But and it's really interesting, Mataji, that you've talked about karma and then performing karma in the spirit of consciousness, in the consciousness of sacrifice. But and we've not even, Krishna hasn't even begun to talk about Atman realization. He
has already action. In chapter 2. He has very clearly talked about Atman realization.
But what I'm saying is chapter 2 is the overview. But when you get into the proper sort of chapter 3 is when it really is, the overview is now complete and you're now into chapter 3. There's no mention of the it's about karma, it's about action, isn't it? Which is really interesting.
Performing the duties, because Krishna also says that nobody can abstain from action, because without working, you cannot even maintain your body.
Yes, absolutely.
So karma is, a must. But the karmani, yagyartat, karmana, for the purpose of yagya. And yagya is the name of Vishnu.
Yes, absolutely. But what I'm saying, Mataji, is that he's not drilled into the science of Atman realization yet. He's gone into something that all of us
it's a very big step forward. Yeah, sure. Yeah, but it's, still we have another, 15 chapters to go. Right? From chapter 3, that we go from 15 chapters, to chapter 18, right? Okay. Can you hear me? Still there? Your microphone is off.
Yes, I can hear you fully, and I'm just absorbing what you're saying on that point.
No problem. Yeah, then we have the chapter 4, which is Jnana Yoga, the yoga of knowledge, which is also very interesting. Then chapter 5, and so on and so forth.
But Mataji, again, chapter 4 is very interesting because there's a very, very famous beginning of it that everyone remembers, which is when he talks about the science of knowledge and how everyone knows 4.1 about sun god, etc. So, what's the relevance of putting that, how the knowledge is transmitted, the proper transmission of knowledge? Why does that appear there? Is it to give us a foundation? I'd like your thoughts on that.
It is about making us aware of the fact that this knowledge is eternal. This knowledge has always been there. It's not something new. Okay. After clarifying the difference between the temporary material body and the eternal Atman, Krishna continues to answer Arjuna's questions. In the last chapter, he explained the concept of duty and of action or renunciation that consists in performing one's prescribed duty selflessly, without being greedy to enjoy the results of one's actions. He introduced the concept of sacrifice, of the action of performing one's duties as a sacred offering to the Supreme, and explained how the various religious activities are meant for the progress of the individual, and not only for the benefit of society and the universe at large. In this chapter, Krishna explained that this knowledge of sacred action, jnana, is the first step towards the realization of self, and a transcendentally conscious way of life called yoga. The progressive way to act in this world is not just about doing one's duty, but it is about the evolution of the consciousness. Without the proper awareness, the action only carries a fraction of its value, and the individual will not develop his full potential. This is the reason why people feel frustrated and unhappy when they are engaged unwillingly in activities that they feel as mechanical and not beneficial for their own evolution and for the welfare and progress of the universe. On the other hand, those who feel that their work is constructive and beneficial both for themselves and for the community are happier also in the other areas of their life. The more one grows, the larger is the horizon he becomes able to contemplate. At first he can see only his own benefit. Then he expands that field to the people he loves, family, community, nation, and as he opens his mind to the greater reality, he starts to connect with all life and consciousness. Selfishness is distempered into selflessness when the mind overcomes the illusion of duality, means through knowledge. How can we go from selfishness to selflessness? Because we know we are not the material self. Okay. Since that all life is one. At this level, the human being becomes an active player in the plan of God, a co-worker with the devas that control, nurture, and protect the universe, and his consciousness becomes divine. This was illustrated in the wheel of reciprocation, of which Krishna spoke in verses 3:11 to 3:16. But there is more to this development of consciousness than simply becoming cooperative with the divine. By engaging selflessly in sacred action, one approaches supreme reality, and we start to talk about the Brahman, that is even above and beyond the level of the Devas, the supreme personality of Godhead that is called Krishna, the supreme consciousness that is truly perfect in eternity, knowledge, and happiness. So, all those who can make out the meaning of life and find only loss, pain, and despair in the world are suffering unnecessarily, and only because they're getting everything backwards, out of ignorance. They don't know how the world is supposed to function, and how they're supposed to function as persons. So, we go for the knowledge. And as you said, the first verse is saying, the Lord said, I have explained this eternal science of yoga to Vivaswan, and Vivaswan taught it to Manu, and Manu told it to Ikshvaku. Imam Vivasvate yogam proktavam aham avyayam.
Yes.
But avyayam.
This is very famous.
Yeah. It's very famous because it is used as a prop for the idea of the Sampradaya.
Yes.
But we need to understand what the Parampara means. Because some people, like the people we know, we both know, believe that the Parampara is a lineage, it's a descendants, a family, something that is, exists beyond the knowledge, in which the various links are just, delivering the message without the need for realization.
Yes.
But this is very incorrect. Because parampara only means from one person to another. The idea of sampradaya means tradition. But the point is that, any tradition can start anytime, from anyone. But as Krishna says, himself in Bhagavad Gita, saying, this way the Rajarishis have learned this knowledge in a descending line, means the Guru is teaching to the disciple. But after such a long time, this yoga has becomes lost. So when the knowledge, when the realization is not actually, realized by the next link, the sampradaya is going kaput. Lost.
Yes, absolutely.
Nasha.
And I think, and what's really interesting is when you talk about this, you recognize, you drill into detail when you talk about chapter 4, you drill into detail the idea that there needs to be new people coming, there needs to be new ways of doing things that reinvent the old.
They don't reinvent, they repackage.
They repackage, sorry, I'm just choosing my words, but what you're suggesting here is that you have to have new ways of
No, but first of all, you need to realize it. You need to realize the actual contents of the package.
Yes.
Because if you don't understand what the content of the package is supposed to be, or it is, then what are you going to package?
Mataji, I'm going to put you on the spot here, and you know, chapter 4. You've really beautifully highlighted the key point of chapter 3. I mean, you know, that's amazing. What do you think are the key messages emerging from chapter 4? Because you know the overview is important, because you read this and a lot of your followers will be like me, who will read a chapter a day and wonder why.
Let me do one thing, because I cannot do the screen sharing for that, but I have the printed part.
Yes.
So I have all these introductions in the printed form, which some of these introductions are mostly they are in Italian language. So let me check, because in the appendix I have done a similar work. So the first volume is the Mahabharata. Okay, introduction, okay. To Vedic knowledge, that's not it. Bhagavad Gita appendix, okay, here it is. We have 3 appendices. Okay, 1, 2, 3. So the appendix 1 is the Gita Mahatmya by Adi Shankar. Then we have the summary of the Mahabharata. And then we have the summary of the story of Krishna. So we can start to understand the context. Now, the appendix number 2 is the glossary. So the explanation of all the various terms and the names of the people. And then the appendix number 3 is a guide to the study. So, method of study. Then we have the context of Bhagavad Gita, first reading, and the summary of the chapter 1. We have gone through that, summary of chapter 2, and specifically the important verses. Then from verse 11, it goes on. Then chapter 3, we are talking about the Yagya, and chapter 4, here it is. Okay, I'm going to translate simultaneously. Chapter 4. Krishna states that this science of action, yoga, has been revealed to human beings since the dawn of time. But periodically it is forgotten. Therefore, it is necessary to present it again and again. This is the reason why God descends as avatar. So this is from the verses 6 to verse 9. Then Krishna continues to explain the science of action, and particularly the duties of human beings towards society, that is in verse 13, on the distinction between the karma and vikarma, which is the dutiful action and the prohibited or non-prescribed action, how the dutiful action performed without selfishness is liberating. So we have, these are the verses from 16 to 19. From verse 25 to 34, Krishna explains that the sacred action or sacrifice does not consist simply on the celebration, superficial performance of ritual ceremonies, but any action performed with the proper consciousness is equally sacred. From verse 35 to 42, which is the end of the chapter, Krishna highlights how the sacred action is free from all karmic reactions and leads to the perfection of life. So this is the chapter 4 and talks about knowledge, jnana. Okay.
That's wonderful, because what Shri Krishna talks about there is, first of all, he begins with the key that this knowledge can be lost over time. So
Exactly.
it's important to have means to regain that knowledge.
Yeah, present it again
over time.
and again.
Yes.
And again.
But
yeah.
And then what you're saying there is the later parts of chapter 4 is when he describes how actions performed in the right consciousness don't invoke a karmic reaction.
That doesn't create karmic reactions. And this is coming to the concept of sannyasa yoga. What is the real sannyas? So knowledge brings to renunciation, because we know what is our purpose. Our purpose is to be just an instrument. Nimitta matra bhava sabhyasachin. We just need to be instruments without any selfish purpose. We do our duty as a service to the entire body of the Virat Rupa. You remember the Purusha Sukta, where the human society is described as the body of the Virat Purusha. So when we are serving, we are doing our duty in the Varna Ashrama Dharma, in the Varna Ashrama system. We are serving the body of the Virat Purusha. Each person in their own capacity. And the important point to understand here is that the divisions of the Varna Ashrama system are not based on birth prejudice or lineage, descent, as in the Sampradaya, where people are not qualified but they're just representing the Guru.
Yes.
It's the same idea. The point is that just like serving the social body, serving the Brahmanas is good, but the point is that Brahmanas must be Brahmanas. They cannot just be, stopgap puppets.
Yes.
And in the same way, the Guru must be a Guru, must be realized. Otherwise, the Sampradaya is gone. The Parampara is gone.
So, would you say, Mataji, I'm conscious we've gone past the hour, but we've covered a lot. Would you say that chapter 4, Shri Krishna talks about the science of knowledge, the science of how knowledge is transmitted, the correct way how knowledge is transmitted? That is important. The realization of that is covered in the beginning of chapter 4.
And that's important, because otherwise all the yagyas, all the karma yoga, becomes stupid, because it's like when, as the shastras say, when you do a yagya, a homa, without the proper qualifications, the proper understanding, the proper knowledge, is just pouring ahuti on the ash, not in the fire. Useless.
Yes.
So the karma yoga without the jnana is useless, because what are you doing? You don't know what you're doing. So what's the value?
Yes. And obviously chapter 4 speaks of the Varna system, and you've highlighted that very importantly. And then Shri Krishna talks about action in the correct mode of consciousness. Are there any other points from chapter 4, Mataji, that you feel might be relevant in the overview?
No, then we'll have to read the chapter, because chapter 4 is quite fast.
Yes, absolutely.
One of the biggest chapters that I find particularly interesting is chapter 13. So if
Yes.
we can very quickly go to see, then you see there is more and more purport with more and more, quotes and everything. So chapter 13 is interesting. Prakriti Purusha Vibhaga Yoga. The yoga of understanding nature and as distinct from the personal principle. So after the scene setting introduction, chapter 1, the first 4 chapters, 2 of Sankhya Yoga, 3 of Karma, 4 of Jnana, 5 of Sannyasa, of the text of the Bhagavad Gita were about the self, about Tvam, you, and how to evolve and progress in self-realization. Krishna has explained about karma and duty and how we are supposed to work in this world selflessly, without attachment and material identifications. The second group of 4 chapters, 6 are Dhyana, 7 are Vijnana, 8 are Taraka Brahma, 9 of Rajaguhya, were about Tat, that, which is the supreme consciousness and reality. Krishna has explained about the meaning and practice of meditation. So from the realization of the Atman, we can move to the realization of Brahman, Paramatma and Bhagavan, while we are still in this world. The third group of 4 chapters, 10 are Vibhuti, 11 are Vishwarupa Darshana, 12 are Bhakti, 13 are Prakriti Purusha Viveka Yoga, are about Tattva Jnana, the process of knowledge of reality. And Krishna explains precisely how to apply and execute Bhakti in a genuine way, by appreciating the transcendental nature of God and entering into the supreme consciousness. The fourth and last group of 4 chapters, 14 are Gunatraya Vibhaga, 16 are Daiva Sura Sampada, 17 are Shraddha Traya, 18 are Moksha, are about liberation or the ultimate success of the entire process. And their teachings are summarized with the famous aphorism Tat Tvam Asi. Krishna clarifies the dangerous traps on the road to liberation and how to make the last steps away from material conditionings. Because even a liberated soul, Jivan Mukta, still has to deal with the 3 gunas as long as he or she lives in this world. So we see here we have 4 chapters, and you probably have noticed that chapter 15 is missing. Okay, there is a reason why. Okay, because we are going to see that. So if we want to summarize the entire Bhagavad Gita in 4 steps, we can describe them as Tvam, Tat, Tattvam, Tattvam Asi. Are you following?
I am, and that's exactly
what you wanted.
The structure that I was looking for. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's exactly the overview that I sort of desired, and I think that's helped a lot of people.
Yeah.
That partitioning of those 4 4 chapter blocks, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 4 groups. Then, besides the first scene setter, chapter 1, there is another atypical chapter in the text of Bhagavad Gita, the 15th. So 1 and 15 are connected. That interrupts the thread of discussion to remind us about the mystical aspect of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Purushottama, who is completely independent from the manifestation of this world and even from the knowledge contained in the Vedic scriptures. Then we go, 12th chapter, and this is most, from here onwards, we analyze more about the chapter 13, okay, which is also important. Okay.
So Mataji, for our next discussion, could we drill into these 4 subgroups, Mataji? Could that be something we could do? Because I think that would be very useful. Yeah. Because I think that would be really useful, because people will know these 4 subgroups roughly, but I think that detail, I think, is now the next step, and you brought us nicely to what I feel would be the next topic of discussion.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so we are stopping the sharing, and we can stop the recording. Stay there 1 minute. We'll discuss when to do the next step. Okay. So, Jai,
Yes.
thank you for supporting the work we are doing. Jai Shri Narayana.